So the world woke up this morning to the news that Pope Francis has just died, aged 88. And in this video, I'd like to just share the headlines about this and to offer some preliminary reflections about the significance of his death for Muslims. Obviously, I don't speak for all Muslims, but I'll just give some of my own personal reflections on his pontificate, some of his more controversial views, how traditional Catholics have had to deal with this, and how Muslims have responded to what he has said, both about Palestine and other issues as well. So this is the current BBC News website. Obviously, Pope Francis dies age 88. In the summary, it says Pope Francis, the first Latin American leader of the Roman Catholic Church, has died at 88. There's palpable shock at the Vatican, where the Pope had addressed crowds at an Easter Sunday service. Obviously, just yesterday, the church is still in the Easter season, very much so. Tributes are poured in from world leaders, King Charles, the Italian Prime Minister as well, J.D. Vance, who apparently was the last to meet him just yesterday. There have already been some interesting conspiracy theories about that, which I'm not going to go into at the moment. The Vatican confirmed the pontiff died at 07:35 local time on Monday, which is today, just a few hours ago, really. He was recently discharged from hospital after weeks of treatment for an infection. And just scrolling down here on the BBC website, there's a picture of him meeting the vice president literally hours before he died, apparently. There's an interesting piece here. Palestinian Christians mourn loss of great friend. Palestinian Christians feel they have lost a great friend, says Anton Salman, mayor of Bethlehem in the occupied West Bank, occupied by Israel, of course. He was one of the few leaders in the world who was supporting Palestinian rights and came running to achieve peace in the region, he tells me. When the Pope visited the Holy Land in 2014, a defining image was his prayer for peace by the graffitied concrete wall, which blocks Bethlehem from Jerusalem, part of Israel's West Bank barrier. This obviously has led to accusations of an apartheid state by many people. He went on to lead thousands of local Christians, part of a dwindling religious minority, in an open-air mass outside the Nativity Church, built on the spot where it's believed Jesus was born. It was a really very special day. I even sang for him, says Ronnie Tabash, a local souvenir seller who has large pictures of the Pope on the shutters of his store. He gave us hope, he said. He always told us to have more faith, to resist, to continue to stay here. It's interesting. So apparently the Pope told the Palestinians to resist and to stay in their land, which is very extraordinary. Many Palestinians praise Pope Francis for his regular calls to a priest in Gaza City at the Holy Family Catholic Church as he checked on the well-being of Gazan Christians sheltering on the site. Recently, the Pope had been increasingly vocal about Israel's military offensive in Gaza, calling the situation there dramatic and deplorable. In his last Easter message, which would have been yesterday, Sunday, of course, he called for a ceasefire, demanding that Hamas release remaining hostages, as well as for aid for the starving people that aspires to a future of peace. So of Western leaders, perhaps he's quite rare, even unique, in speaking out to support the oppressed, the downtrodden, whoever they may be, including those who are suffering in the occupied Palestinian lands at the moment. So yeah, so that's the headline, obviously. But coming to some more theological issues, really. Some Muslims, theologians and others, have been uncomfortable with Pope Francis's universalist tone. And this comes out in his language, for example, when he spoke about everyone, all being children of God, or everyone being saved. And obviously this is problematic from the position of the New Testament, which has a clear demarcation between the saved and the damned. If you think of some of the New Testament sayings in the Gospels, and the idea of everyone being a children of God, well, even those who follow Satan, even those who reject God, who defy God. So his kind of implied universalism sits uncomfortably with many traditional Catholics, and even the teaching of the church itself, actually found in the Catechism. And there are other issues which have upset a lot of people, not just Muslims, but traditional Catholics, where Pope Francis was seen as aligning very closely with liberal secular values, particularly on LGBTQ issues, where he appeared to call for church blessing of same-sex couples, same-sex unions, which caused a huge amount of controversy within the leadership of the church. Many bishops in Africa and other parts of the world rejected this recent pontifical teaching. Now, he responded by saying, or his representatives responded by saying, well, it's not the union that's being blessed, it's just the individuals that are part of the union. But this was a very kind of a Jesuitical distinction, because he was a Jesuit and they're known for their fine hair splitting. But the impression was given to many, many people that he was calling for God's blessing or the church's blessing on homosexual unions. And this caused huge amounts of scandal. But also the Western liberal press, the secular groups in the West, loved it, of course. And this is why he was accused of association with secular liberalism and capitulating to Western liberalism, the dilution of traditional Christian teaching. And many Catholics, conservative Catholics, obviously said that. And coming back to issues affecting Muslims, he was criticized by Muslims in Europe, especially France, who were very disappointed that the Pope had not been more outspoken against France's ban on the hijab in public spaces, and also the rising Islamophobia under the guise of laïcité, secularism in France, and the crackdowns on Muslim organizations. And it was thought that he didn't speak out about this hardly at all. And this perceived silence has been interpreted as inconsistency in defending religious freedom, which the Catholic Church says it supports religious freedom. So that's quite a serious criticism. And there are a number of others to do with, his views about Islam being quite superficial and not very in depth. But I think one of the things that I experienced in my conversations with some Roman Catholic priests and lay Catholic faithful, and this perplexed me, because listening to Pope Francis over the years was a really confusing experience, I think, for many traditional Catholics and priests. What does he believe about, say, LGBT questions? Because on the one hand, he seems to have a very open door. Oh, come into the church, everyone. You're welcome. Unconditional acceptance, unconditional love. You're all children of God. And yet, on the other hand, there's the teaching of the church, which labels certain things as absolutely prohibited and wrong, like any sex outside of marriage. It upholds clear gender roles. So there's biologically, not just biology, but the created essence of a man and a woman is intended by God. It's part of the theological anthropology of the Catholic Church. These differences between men and women are fundamental to what it means to be a man and woman. So there's this confusion about where he was taking the church. Is he becoming was he taking the church in a more liberal direction? Was he going to change the teaching of the church? Now, in the end, he didn't. He seemed to keep the barriers, the harams, the prohibitions in place, but his arguably over pastoral stress on people's feelings and needing to feel included and welcoming everyone and not being harsh and being understanding and very, very lenient and pastoral in his approach, seemed to many to really push at the boundaries and implicitly shift the goalposts, even though explicitly that wasn't done. And this created some cognitive dissonance, some confusion amongst the faithful, and not just ignorant Catholics, but priests and others who weren't sure what on earth he was about. Was he trying to change the teaching of the church? My own suspicion is he wasn't, but I think maybe part of him would have liked to have changed it. I think he would have liked to have gone a lot further, but this is my guess. But I think he felt he couldn't, because the tradition of the church is very, very clear on these matters, and so he couldn't really go as far as he possibly would have liked. So I often met traditional Catholics who were very, frankly upset or even despairing of the Pope's failure to give a clear moral lead on many issues in their view. And I think they had a point, actually. Now, of course, he has now passed away, and all eyes now will be looking at his successor. And I suspect, and this is my prediction, is that the leaders of the church, i.e. the cardinals, the princes of the Roman Catholic Church, and the bishops and the priests and so on, will really want to have a leader now who doesn't continue this really kind of confused pastoral mission of the church, and will want to kind of settle down and just keep the boundaries as they are, preach the truth as they see it, and not indulge in this kind of everyone's welcome. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do, you're welcome into the church attitude. So I think we're going to see a slight conservative retrenchment or reinforcement, not to an extreme, I don't think, but I think we're going to move away from this kind of slightly anarchic, chaotic kind of, what is going on here, papacy kind of style. I think that the church has become bewildered by that, confused by it a little bit, and will want something slightly more settled and mainstream, and focus on the things that really matter, justice and the Palestinians, and countering the hegemony of militant secularism in the world, and calling people to God, but the God of Jesus and Moses and Muhammad, peace be upon them all of whom proclaim the oneness of God. And this is really my disagreement, my personal disagreement with the church. If you look at the creeds, if the Aqidah, the theology of Moses and Jesus and Muhammad, peace be upon them, it's the same. So, if you look at Deuteronomy 6:4, the Shema, this is what every devout Jew utters every day, several times. It's there in the Torah. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. It's not three in one, it's one. And then Jesus was asked, according to Mark's gospel, what is the greatest commandment? And what did he say? And Christians always get this wrong. Love your neighbor as yourself. No. He repeated this very creed, this Aqidah, Shema. He said, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. If Jesus was a Trinitarian, this would have been the time for him to instruct his disciples about the truth of Trinitarian theology, that God is Father, God is fully Son, God is Holy Spirit, and the three are one, etc. He didn't say that. He simply repeated the creed of Prophet Moses, upon whom be peace. And what does Islam say? Well, the 112th surah, the chapter of the Quran, very short chapters, 4 verses, it actually uses the same language of the original Hebrew or and the Aramaic, echad. In Hebrew, it actually says that God is one as well. This oneness, the unity of God, monotheism, or tawheed, as it's called in Arabic, is something that the Quran, Muhammad, Jesus, and Moses, peace be upon them all repeatedly reaffirmed, restated, to educate and teach us about the truth about God. And this is what the Catholic Church really needs to hear and listen to. And if it is going to change its teaching in good ways, positive ways, it needs to perhaps to embrace the teaching of all these prophets, because this is the authentic teaching from God, that they were called to proclaim to the world. So maybe we should all call for the Catholic Church to return to the original faith of all the prophets of God. No prophet anywhere in the Jewish Bible, anywhere, whether it be Micah or Jeremiah or Isaiah or Moses, or none of them ever preached a Trinitarian understanding of God, that God, the Father is fully God, the Son is fully God, the Holy Spirit is fully God. So it's three divine beings, but no, somehow this is one God. None of them preach this. So we have no right to go beyond or contradict that core Aqidah, that core theology, the nature and reality of God. So maybe this would be a good place for a new papacy to go back to the source, the original religion of God, the religion of Abraham. And interestingly, that's exactly what the Quran repeatedly says. This is nothing new. Islam is nothing new. It is simply the religion of Abraham. And Abraham is such an important prophet in all of the so-called Abrahamic faiths. And so we should follow him and his teaching for our own good success in this life and in the world to come. So that would be my prayer, my hope. The church will heed that core message of its own prophets that he says it follows and believes in. So why not? Why not follow that teaching? So this day, as I say, Pope Francis dies aged 88. He nearly passed away, I think, several weeks ago in hospital, but they revived him. So he was on borrowed time, really. Now he finally passed away. Maybe we'll need a bit of space between now. We need a bit of distance to really evaluate his pontificate, his papacy, when he ruled the church, just to look back at the whole of it and see how it fits in with the Catholic tradition. Was it a force for good? What positive legacy, what legacy has the Pope left the church? This is the question. How do we sift this legacy? For me, I would like it to there to be a firm call to the fundamentals of the faith of Jesus himself and his mother and his disciples, peace be upon them all. These people, these prophets and disciples and companions and his mother were all monotheists and called to monotheism as found in the Torah and in the Injil and in the Quran, these three key revelations. And there were others, but that we still treasure today. So let that be a key message, inshallah. Let me know what you think about Pope Francis, his ministry. If you think it's a force for good, a force for bad. I know a lot of liberal / progressive Catholics today will privately be relieved that this pontificate, this papacy has concluded, and they will be looking forward with great hope for a more Catholic, dare I say it, a more traditional Pope to succeed him. And I think we will see that, inshallah, in those areas where Pope Francis was equivocal, unclear, confusing, seemed to be giving mixed signals. You know, what's he really believe about a whole bunch of things? It confused a lot of people in the church. I know, because I spoke to many of them and they were very confused. People who wanted to think well of Francis still found him confusing. His style, his teaching, you know, what's he really about? So I think the next Pope will be, as I said before, a much more clear, mainstream, sober, non-confusing, non-anarchical kind of leader, which I think will give the church a breathing space to try and consolidate, look at the legacy of Pope Francis and decide it's the which way it wants to go in the future. But I hope, above all, it will call to monotheism, the monotheism of the prophets, above all, the monotheism of Jesus, upon whom be peace, upon whom the church claims to be founded. Let us return to the original faith of the prophets and do away with any beliefs in the prophets are divine or semi-divine or should be worshipped or anything like this. This is terrible. It's a terrible deviation from the truth, inshallah. Until next time.